Teachers of Reddit, what is your best read the note to the class story? One time a student had passed a note and I asked it to be read out. Read. Bish to take KKN. Bastards had been playing a game correspondence chess during my lesson. I let them carry on. In high school a girl in class passed a note to another girl, asking if she had a pad or tampon. Teacher completely blew up, started yelling at them, and asked them to read it out loud. They did, and the teacher, who was an older man, immediately calmed down and let it go. I think he was more embarrassed than the girls. Maybe he was on his period. My then fiancée was a high school math teacher. One day she thought she saw a note being passed, but she wasn't sure, so she waited. Then she thought she saw it again. Finally she saw it, walked over, and took it. It was a wedding card, signed by half of the class. Before she took it, she cried, "Edit, yes, she's now my wife." Student not a teacher. In maybe the 4th or 5th grade a kid is trying to pass me a note and is caught by the teacher. I wasn't paying attention to where it came from. I only noticed when it was about to be handed to me. She makes him read the note in front of the class. He reads the note and it says, "You wanna be my boyfriend? I like the way your booty moves when you walk." I overreact and say I'm not gay, and the boy says I didn't write that, it came from Tasha. Everyone laughs and she and I are both extremely embarrassed. After class I go to talk to her at the locker and she says, "Yeah, I wrote it, but I don't like you like that anymore." Legend has it I'm still single to this day. As long as your booty still moves in the same way when you walk, there's still a chance. A positive spin. I was long-term subbing a class. One day I noticed students discreetly passing around a piece of paper while I was teaching. I went to retrieve it, and discovered it was a petition signed by each student requesting I remain their teacher for the rest of the year. In health class, we were talking about boners and how they fill up with blood. My cousin took a piece of paper and wrote, "Your PP is filled with blood," and threw it at some popular kid. The teacher picked it up and you can see him die inside because of the immaturity of 8th graders and how he has to teach them for a career. Blood is stored in the PP. Pee is stored in the balls. Not a teacher, but when I was in high school, I started a note from the back row of the class, which was passed and read by nearly everyone in the class. The teacher grabbed it as it went past him. When there was only 3 people left who hasn't read it, I think he was going to read it out to the class, but he looked at it before he read it. All the note said was that the zip on his pants was down. With all respect to him, he calmly zipped up and continued teaching. Basically the same thing happened in my art class. The teacher left the room and I announced it to the whole class, and when he came back we all died laughing, and to this day he still doesn't know why. Student, not the teacher. In my college thermodynamics class the professor said that he didn't care if we got a text message in class. However, he did care if we had our ringers on. So his rule was that if you got a text message and your phone went off loud enough for the whole room to hear it, you had 2 options. You could either read the text out loud to the whole class, or you could bring in donuts for everyone at the next class. There were about 20 of us. Of course everyone keeps their phones on silent, so it never happens. Until smack dab in the middle of one of the exams, when the professor's phone gets a text message and rings out loud and clear in the middle of the exam. Professor freezes, takes one look at his phone as we all start giggling, and says, "Guess I'm bringing you guys all donuts on Wednesday." They were delicious. I was really good about silencing my phone in college, but it happened once. One of my roommates was a fan of wrestling and my ringtone for him was that obnoxious "and his name is John Cena do 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 do" clip. It went off during an exam in Chem 2, the only class in which I was considered the overachiever. Embarrassing, but funny even at the time. One day in middle school, right around when the Nintendo Wii came out, you could add other friends online for certain compatible online Wii games by sharing a serial code of like 16 numbers or something around there. Sitting in the back of our 7th period science class, 3 of my friends and I started to exchange and write down our Wii serial codes on a small piece of paper. We'd pass it down and share it as we passed it and copy them in our notebooks. Our teacher pauses his lecture as he looks at us. He just gets up from the front of the class, walked to our row where the 4 of us sat, put his hand out to my buddy for the paper with all of our serial codes on it, takes a moment to glance at it only to see a matrix of random numbers followed by the first letter of our names. He then glances up at us and then to my buddy with the most dumbfounded stare, squints, and asked, is this some kind of joke? Cause I'm clueless on this one. My buddy that had to explain ourselves saved us all the embarrassment and said I'll explain after class as he blushed. Luckily our teacher was a really cool dude and was fine with that answer and told us to just put it away. We told him after class and he understood but also said he was expecting some sort of elaborate code that we were encrypting messages in. Haha. Not a teacher, but there was one teacher who was really cool, but still took his teacher job seriously. One lesson there is a note being passed around. Because of the giggling he sharpened his senses and honed in on the note's location and intercepted the handoff. Did that getting ready for a speech cough. Opened the note and laughed. The note said, giggle and pass it on. There was another time he intercepted a note that said, happy birthday MR. Not a note, but an anonymous question to the class in health class in freshman year of high school. We had to anonymously write questions about sexuality and the reproductive process, and the teacher would pull out a random card, read the question, and respond with a textbook answer. Said teacher was very religious and very open about her faith in a way that almost seemed patronizing. So I was surprised when she pulled out and read a card that said, what does the word see mean? She looked at the card, looked at us all calm, and then proceeded to pull up Wikipedia and other web media to inform us of the origin of the word, its connotation, and how it's used differently around the world. I was kind of shocked that she just wanted us to know what it meant, as if to say don't look like a dumb F if you want to use this word in a sentence. I taught for a decade in a really rough area. I intercepted a lot of notes and was pretty shameless in public humiliation of my kids. I read a lot of bad stuff out loud. However, one really nice moment that stands out was when the super popular bubbly Latina girl sat next to the stereotyped depressed weird white theater band girl. I see them passing notes, which is really uncharacteristic. The band girl seemed off and upset, but I'll let it go because it seemed like there was something going on more. And the Latina girl was a really nice kid. I didn't think she was bullying or anything. I had the girls stay after for a second and asked them what was up. The Latina girl said, I was worried about her. She looked sadder than usual, so I wanted to make sure she's cool. I asked the other girl if that's what was happening and she said yep, and showed me the notes, which was a really heartfelt convo about boys, relationships and feeling lonely. It was so damned sweet. I asked if they needed more time, and they both said yes. I could get them excused from their next class and they asked if they could chill and talk more. I said sure, because you bet your wellness and mental health is a lot more important than curriculum. They really had a moment, and it seemed to help them both. This was as 10th graders. I got to see them really develop a nice friendship over the next few years. Go girls, wherever you are now. I hope you are still friends and I'm glad I could help facilitate that. Another non-teacher here. But my 7th grade teacher typically always wore a dress shirt to class and looked very presentable, but this day he had his sleeves rolled up. Now, everyone loved this teacher, but my immediate though was to write a note to my friend sitting beside me that his arms were super hairy, and that note was passed back and forth with us cracking jokes about it. Nothing malicious or overly mean, just that we didn't think he'd have such hairy arms. We eventually got caught, and between classes he took us aside and warned us to not pass notes, and since this was the first time this happened he would toss it out without reading it and let us go. Well, a couple months go by and he decides to wear short sleeves again, and his arms were noticeably less hairy. I know 12-year-olds don't have the greatest moral compass, but to this day I still feel so bad that my dumbest little note might have made him so self-conscious about something so unimportant. I'm sorry MR. Fifield, wherever you are now. Not a teacher, but once I wrote a love letter to a guy when I was 9 years old. When I got caught, a guy took the blame and read it to the whole class. He never said who wrote it. Thank you Devin. Devin is the man we all aspire to be. A girl that sat behind me in 4th grade punched me in the nose one day because I was turned around messing with her. My nose was bleeding profusely when the teacher came back in the room. The teacher asked me why my nose was bleeding and I told her I must have gotten too hot or something. That girl and myself now have 2 beautiful daughters together. A simple thank you would have probably sufficed. Not a teacher, but something one of my teachers told me outside of school. The students were learning about properties of rocks and minerals. The first student wrote "What's cleavage?" on a note, referencing the mineral property. The second student responded with a human anatomy description. 7th grade biology. My teacher was going over genetics and the girl I was sitting by was not the brightest bulb, nor was she paying attention. My teacher asks her where she gets her genes from, and the girl replies, "JC Penney." Not really a note, but when I was teaching college classes, I caught two of the girls whispering, so I told them, if you're going to tell secrets, you need to share with the rest of the class. I taught preschool before this. She looked right at me and said, without the slightest embarrassment, "I was just telling her that I think you have a cute butt." I was teaching a communications class, and we were discussing communications in the workplace, and I looked down at the textbook. After seeing what the next section was, I said okay. Moving on to the next section, titled SUAL harassment. Everyone roared with laughter. A couple weeks later, at a baseball game paid for by the school, she came on to me really hard, with my fiancé right there. I am not a teacher, but I have a story which was kind of the opposite. When I was in college, I was in a large math lecture hall 2 times a week, and me and my friends took to making paper planes and throwing them down from the back of the theater. We did it often and I am sure we thought we were hilarious. Somehow nobody said a word except for the occasional snicker, and it went on like that, on and off for the semester. Then, on the last day, I remember writing "Happy Christmas Dr. Jones" on a plane and throwing it down. Seeing it land in front of the lecturer, he blew a fuse and started shouting about how this had been going on all semester and he thought it was a disgrace. Then he picked up the plane and read the message, got very embarrassed and meekly said thank you. I still cringe to think of my childish actions, but it did give me that moment of connection with the lecturer before failing his class. 11th grade physics class. I teach maths, but I was assigned to be present in the class for supervision. In that school, new teachers get to have a more experienced one in the classroom. I was standing at the back of the class when I saw 2 kids passing around notes and said, "You want to read that out loud or maybe give it to me? I could use something to read," to help out the guy with not having to deal with it and continue the lesson. That didn't happen though. The boys start laughing, which makes the class and me laugh as well. Damn the infectious laughter, lol. Instead of giving the paper straight to me, I didn't expect them to read it. The boy opens the note and takes a deep breath. He reads out loud, "Imagine everybody tied to the spring is a slice of ham." Everyone lost it. It was such a random thing to say. I believe the physics teacher still has that note. For some reason this got me laughing too. My favorite wholesome note will always be, "Shut up Josh, you did not hook up with Maddie last night. You are gayer than Mr. Dinosaur Galakim. We all support and love your gay BA." I did not read the note aloud. I just put it down and said, "What's your language?" I'm the student in the story, not the teacher. In 7th grade science class, my friend and I passed notes to each other through the guys sitting between us. Our teacher caught on of the boys with the note but knew it wasn't him because it had enough doodles of hearts flowers on it. She opened it up to read to the class to catch whoever did write it. However, the note was written completely in Tolkien's Elvish alphabet and she couldn't read a word. Most of the class knew that it had to be me and my friend cause we're the only LOTR nerds in the class obsessed enough to teach ourselves the Elvish alphabet. But thankfully no one ratted us out. We were hoping that writing notes in Elvish would keep the boys from reading about my friend's massive crush on one of them, but it ended up also saving us from getting in trouble. I'm 6th grade, not a teacher. The teacher read aloud a note these 2 kids were passing back and forth, and it was just all the lyrics to Low by Flo Rida. I don't know if this is the best, but it's pretty profound. I usually ignored note passing. If a student didn't want to pay attention but wasn't bothering anyone else, I was cool. In the age of cell phones, notes were kind of outdated anyway. So I had this student who could do origami like a boss, and he was always making all kinds of animal figures and cool shapes that I would put on the corkboard behind my desk. This one day he is getting his fold on and is completely focused and not paying attention. Before I know it, class is over and it's on my desk. He stops on the way out of my class and says, "You're gonna wanna read that." I read it and he asking for lunch money cause his mom took off and he was hungry. It hurts being a teacher some days. Were you able to give him the money? I've heard that teachers aren't allowed to directly intervene like that sometimes. Absolutely, and I put money into his cafeteria account. If anything, at least he'd be able to eat breakfast and lunch at school. Unfortunately, I also had to make a CPS report. I was in 8th grade and it was a hot, sunny day in mid-May. I wrote "it's snowing" on a piece of paper and showed it to my friend sitting next to me, who immediately looked out the window. We both laughed because obviously it wasn't snowing. Then he and I laughed when I showed it to another student and they immediately looked out the window, and so on until most of the class is in on the joke and watching as I show the piece of paper to the next unwitting fool. Almost every student knows what's going on. When my teacher sees that I'm showing this piece of paper to everyone and making them laugh, she walks over to my desk, looks down at the piece of paper that says "it's snowing" and instinctively looks out the window. The entire class bursts out in laughter. Somewhat related, but in 8th grade history, a girl was too talkative and the teacher yelled, "Hey, why don't you try teaching the class?" And the girl said okay and got up, took the textbook and started teaching. She did it perfectly and didn't miss a beat. It was hilarious. I did this with a super obnoxious girl and it changed everything. She started prepping for class, working out how she's teach, and I'd give her 5 minutes a day to teach. She went from one of the worst students to one of the best in a couple of months, and did AP the year after. That girl, Albert Einstein,